السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله رب العالمين. أهلا وسهلا مرحبا. Welcome to our 8th Seerah session بإذن الله. And inshallah ta'ala, I pray that this will be a beneficial session for myself and for everyone who attend and for those who watch the recording as well بإذن الله. So inshallah ta'ala, just have to remind ourselves that whatever we are doing, we have to be doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a reminder that we have to constantly renew our intention to ensure that it is aligned with seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in today's session, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be looking at two other qualities of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and we will be looking at particular incidents and the examples, the lessons we can take, the practical lessons we can take from these incidents. As we recognize that the objective or the methodology of our Seerah sessions is that we are trying to implement just as how our Prophet ﷺ lived, we are trying to implement the qualities that he had since he was khuluqin adim. He had an exalted character. So without any further delay, inshallah ta'ala, I'll bring up my slides, idhnillah, and then let's get to it, inshallah. So again, we will always start with the ayah, inshallah ta'ala, as our pretty much our introductory ayah for our topic. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And we have sent you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, not but as a mercy to the universe, a mercy to al-alameen, man, jinn, and everything that exists. Bi'idhnillah, as I said, there are two qualities we want to look at today, inshallah ta'ala. We want to look at his generosity and his justice. But in looking at his generosity, there are some qualities I would like to touch on, inshallah ta'ala. Various levels, as some of the scholars mentioned, there are various levels of generosity. So let us now look at this, inshallah ta'ala. Amongst the 10, there are 10 that I have here, inshallah ta'ala, 5 on this and 5 on the next. So amongst the level, with regards to that, number 1, generosity in words and kindness. So there are different types and different levels of generosity. So one of them is generosity in words and kindness. What does this include? Speaking kindly, using polite language, encouraging words, encouraging others, offering compliments, support, and comforting words is the simplest form of generosity, and it requires no material wealth. I mean, anybody should be able to do it. It doesn't matter your status in society. Everybody should be able to give a compliment, support, and comforting words. That's the simplest form of generosity. Another form is giving what is excess. So for example, this now involves from when you have abundance, things that you don't need. For example, there's extra food, extra clothing, household items. One of the methods to do is to just give it as a form of charity. That's another form of generosity, giving from your excess. So number 1, as we said, one of the forms of generosity is that we speak kindly, kind words, and be kind to others. A second is giving from the excess. A third stage of generosity is sharing resources in moderation, sharing it in moderation. So you give moderately from what you possess without depriving yourselves of your basic needs. So this one is being moderate. So not giving away everything and then you're not sure what you're going to eat, then you don't really have any clothing. You have just one clothing, you have to just wash it over and over. When you could have had 2, you could have rotated it. So this is something that we have to do. This is another form of generosity, being moderate in your means of generosity. Number 4 is prioritizing others in equal needs. So at this stage, you give to others who are in equal need, prioritizing their well-being as much as your own. So you realize that this person is a similar category as you, they have similar needs as you prioritize trying to ensure that they have and you have and showing a level of empathy and selflessness because you understand their situation, because you are in a similar situation yourself. Number 5, being generous in times of difficulty, subhanallah. So we can look at these different levels. So the 5th is being generous in times of difficulty. So now let's look at that, inshallah ta'ala. With regards to this, now it involves providing support or charity in times of crisis, offering financial help, shelter, companionship when others are going through hardship. So this is number 5, being generous in times of difficulty. And then continuing on that, inshallah ta'ala, We have number 6, sacrificing comfort for the sake of others. Now, this is a level of generosity that includes giving up your own comfort, such as reducing your personal luxury or conveniences and providing for others in need. And what we will do, inshallah ta'ala, the reason why I'm looking through in the different stages, we can see that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an excellent example. He had all these levels. He demonstrated all of this demonstrated in the Seerah. Of course, based on time, I've selected just five incidents of generosity, and we'll take the lessons from it. But there are numerous. So you could find all of these 10 plus more. So number 7, giving when one is in need. So when you're in a state of need, giving when you're in a state of need. What does this stage is? This is the stage where you give while you're experiencing some level of need, meaning that you're showing to Allah that you have iman in His provision, that you want to help others even at your own cost, even at a personal cost. Number 8, giving in secret. So giving, being generous without seeking recognition or reward from others. Sometimes even the people you're being generous to, even them, you're trying to find a method that not even them know that you're the one that has been charitable to them. So this is another level. And your practice avoiding riya, showing off, and it protects the dignity of those who are receiving, because they don't necessarily know who is giving, and you yourself use a third party, so it protects their dignity. So they don't feel, they don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. They say, oh, but I really respect that brother, that sister. I really didn't want them to know my condition, kind of feel a way that I'm taking from them. And this is something that, of course, you try to maintain their dignity. And this is what Islam does. Number 9, charity for Allah alone, ikhlas. At this stage, you are driven solely just to please Allah. And we've mentioned this in our various sessions, in our ayat and tafsir, we've mentioned this, that your only objective in being generous is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No worldly benefit, you don't need any acknowledgement, you're not expecting a thank you. So we are not saying to Muslims, don't say thank you, because of course, whoever does not thank the people does not thank Allah. So we're not saying that. But you yourself, that's not your expectation. Alhamdulillah, the person is grateful. And when they are grateful, it reminds you that you should say Alhamdulillah as well, that Allah put in a position where you could give them. But this one, just given for the sake of Allah. Don't want any acknowledgement, no worldly benefit. And the highest of the levels is selfless generosity without limit. Now, this is the highest form of generosity. You give selflessly. You don't calculate the cost. You don't expect anything in return. You just have complete trust in Allah's provision that, guess what? Allah is going to provide for me. So I'm going to be generous, and I will give even myself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the 10 stages that have been mentioned by the ulama regarding the various stages of generosity. So I use this as an introduction, inshallah ta'ala, to get now look into Prophet ﷺ, his generosity, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll take at least 5 examples of his generosity and what we can get from that. Subhanallah, the first example I will use is Anas radiallahu anhu. He said that whenever, based on the ties of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ was asked for something, he would always give it. When a man once went to him, the Prophet gave him all of the sheep that filled the open space between 2 mountains. But the Prophet ﷺ, all of this, so there were sheep filling the space between 2 mountains, so in the valley. And the Prophet ﷺ gave him all the sheep. When the man returned to his people, he said, "O my people, embrace Islam. For Muhammad ﷺ gives like who has no fear of poverty." That he gives like somebody who doesn't fear poverty. And this is Sahih Muslim. Now, this example, I want us to spend a minute or so on this example. The Prophet ﷺ would give generously in order to please Allah. Right? In order to please Allah, in order to win over the heart of others, in order to encourage others to embrace Islam. So sometimes as Muslims, you know what we say? We say, well, this person only accepts Islam because they want wealth, because they think Muslims have money. Well, this is the Seerah showing that this person, that even though, yes, there are people who during the time of Prophet ﷺ knew that the dunya would encourage them. He knew that wealth would encourage them to accept Islam, and he gave them as a means of encouragement. So yes, he gave them. So even though he knew that, yes, they initially took it, so they took the wealth, they embraced Islam so that they could get money. This is in his time. So this is happening now, and this is why we have to study the Seerah, because subhanallah, Sometimes we make certain comments, certain remarks, degrade people, not realizing that that was not the methodology of our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That he knew that these people, they wanted wealth. And what did he do? He gave it to them. He knew that this person was weak and they're really only hanging on because they're kind of seeing what they can benefit, how they can benefit from the Muslims. And he gave them whatever he could afford, he would give them, and he would encourage to give them. So this is the sunnah, to give them, encourage them. And then let us look what happened. Based on his adab, based on his mannerism, based on how he demonstrated how he was detached from worldly pursuits, they ended up what? They ended up loving him more than they did him. So they then started loving him more than they loved the worldly pursuits. So even if initially people are seeking material gain, there is nothing wrong with encouraging them, but then of course, teaching them that there is something that is even better than material gain. So it's a sunnah of Muhammad that he would encourage these people with the things that they wanted, with the things that they like. So this example is something that as Muslims we have to take very clearly, understand it, and be mindful that yes, some people, yes, that's what they come for. Let them come for it. It's there, let them come for it. And then, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of Allah, based on our attitude, based on them getting authentic knowledge, and based on how we treat them, then bi'idhnillah, they will turn over, their hearts will change, and get closer to Allah by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one of the examples I really wanted to pull from, that we would see that he would be generous to people, and this would encourage. One of the lesson we can take is that generosity wins hearts. And we can see that in hearts even for people who were not Muslims. And so do not hold back and say, but look like this person is really just money they want. If you have it, if you can afford it, give it to them. So the next one I would like to use, subhanAllah, is another where the Prophet ﷺ was generous to the tribe of Hawazin. Now, this example, after the Battle of Hunayn, the Prophet ﷺ, he would distribute the spoils of war. But these people, let's give a little backdrop behind this particular example. These people showed open enmity toward the Prophet ﷺ for many years. Many years. They showed open enmity. But then when, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ won the Battle of Hunayn, what did he do? He distributed the spoils of war to the tribes of Hawazin. Despite them being recent opponents, despite them opposing him, he distributed the war booty amongst them. Why? To encourage them to accept Islam. So they were not yet Muslims. So imagine he won a battle, and he gave these non-Muslims to encourage them to accept Islam. Further to that, even with that, for example, while he was distributing the spoils, the Prophet ﷺ gave 100 sheep to Safwan bin Umayyah. Now, again, Safwan bin Umayyah, again, he was an opponent, an open opponent against the Prophet ﷺ. Used to speak out against him, very open opponent. The Prophet ﷺ gave him 100 sheep. And then upon that, he gave him another 100 sheep. And then upon that, he gave him another 100 sheep. So while he was distributing, Safwan got 300 sheep. And he was a mushrik, a disbeliever. But what happened? He was moved by the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ, and he accepted Islam. And he later said, Wallahi, by Allah, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ gave me a great deal. And at that time, he was the most despised of people to me. He then continued to give me more and more until he became the most beloved to me. This man became a companion. This man who was an open opponent to the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet ﷺ gave him. He still had him as an enemy. All right, give me some. And the Prophet ﷺ continued to be generous until he became the most beloved. كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. That no matter what people do, no matter what difficulty or hardship or your enemy does, repel it with something that is good. idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Return with something good. Why? Because perchance that your adu, your enemy, will then become your most beloved friend. And we see this throughout this year. So one of the lessons we can take from this is that true generosity can transform enmity into friendship. Giving freely to those who oppose us can open their hearts to goodness and unity. So not because people oppose us, not because they speak out against us, not because they hate Muslims. Give, give. Generosity will open their hearts by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that we have to take very important in terms of the lesson from this importance of generosity. And before I look at the third one, the Prophet ﷺ would even give people of weak iman. So when he saw Muslims that, they were like on the fence, like they're trying to see if they can get a benefit. The Prophet ﷺ, he would prefer to give those people than even the ones that he loved the most. And in one hadith, in Sahih Bukhari, it says that, verily I give a man while I love others more than I do him. Prophet ﷺ said, I give a man, even though I love others more than I do him, than I love the person that I give it, fearing that he will be thrown into the hellfire on his face. Subhanallah. But the Prophet ﷺ said, you know what? I want to encourage this man to still be a Muslim, to practice his deen. So even though there are persons that I love more, I'm going to give him because I want to protect him from the fire. And this perhaps, Prophet ﷺ said, this perhaps explains why he would give 100 camels to certain men of the Quraysh. That he would give so much camels to certain men of the Quraysh and very little to the Ansar, even though he loved the Ansar because they helped him, they supported him. Even though he loved them, he would give more to certain members of the Quraysh. Because again, it just shows that he wanted to win their hearts. And this is a means that is permissible in the Sunnah to win hearts. The third example I will use, inshallah ta'ala, is that disbelieving woman. SubhanAllah, even though we hate disbelief, we should desire good for the disbelievers. So sometimes it is unfortunate Muslims just sing it kafir, 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 and disbelievers and disbelievers. That's really not the approach we should take. That is as if we're showing hatred for the people. We should hate the disbelief, but not the disbelievers. There's a big difference. So we should hate what is within their heart, what they are portraying, but not them, not the people themselves. And let's use one example. On one occasion, upon coming across a disbelieving woman, the Prophet ﷺ used the water she had in 2 canteens or 2 containers in order to provide drinks for the companions. Right? Now, through a miracle from Allah, the containers they became more filled than they had been when the Prophet ﷺ began to remove water from them. And then, subhanAllah, after this occurred, so imagine, Prophet ﷺ borrowed these containers, used them to feed the companions, and then they were even more filled than when he originally received them. And then he said something to his companion. He said, gather food for her. Now, this was not a Muslim. She was not a Muslim. She was a disbeliever. He said, gather food for her. The companions, Ridwanullah alayhi, they gathered dates, flour, and grain. Now, once they had gathered a large quantity of those food items, they placed it all in a garment and then loaded it onto her camel. The Prophet ﷺ then said to her, go and use this food to feed your relatives. You indeed know by Allah that we have not caused your supply of water to decrease at all. Rather, it was Allah who provided us with drink. Subhanallah. So by that miracle, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, look, yeah, don't worry, we didn't reduce your water at all. What we got was for the miracle of Allah that was from Allah. You have more water than you came here with, and we're giving you more supplies. We're giving you date, flour, and grain, loaded camel. And she was not a Muslim. This was his generosity to her. And subhanAllah, the response. Upon returning to her home, she said to her people, I have met someone who is more skilled in magic than all other people. Either that, or he is a prophet, as they claim. Through her, Allah guided her entire town. For she embraced Islam, and then her people did the same. This in Sahih Bukhari. There's another, according to another incident also in Sahih Bukhari, is mentioned that she returned to her people, but they didn't accept Islam immediately. And instead, what they did, the Muslim soldiers, they attacked neighboring townships. So they were attacking different towns, but they didn't attack the town that she lived in. And then she said, I think that they're avoiding attacking us because of me. I believe that because of me, because of what they did for me, they are a counter with me. That's why they're not attacking the town. And then she said to them, so will you not embrace Islam? And they obeyed her, and all at once, all of them accepted Islam. So she gave them da'wah based on the generosity she received, and the entire town accepted Islam. And this is in Sahih Bukhari. So this just shows that even though she was amazed by the miracle that she witnessed, Subhanallah, she was overwhelmed by the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ, overwhelmed by generosity, by his kindness. And she accepted Islam, and an entire town accepted Islam. Why? Because of generosity to one person. Generosity to one person, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided her and guided the entire town. So again, look at these examples of generosity. This is what we need to exemplify as Muslims. Other instances that I will mention, inshallah ta'ala, is when he forgave the people of Makkah, Fath Makkah. Subhanallah, many of us are familiar with that the Prophet ﷺ, he forgave them and he said, "Idhabu fa antum talaqqa," go, you are free. Instead of taking revenge, he gave them amnesty. Now, this level of generosity and forgiveness, it's powerful for reconciliation, very powerful. So as Muslims, this is also a means of generosity. Choosing mercy over retribution, you can transform hostility into peace. A lot of time people want their pound of flesh. There's some this, no, it is better to be merciful, and that is a means of transforming hostility into peace. Another example is the Prophet ﷺ, his support in the companions during famine. Remember, I mentioned 10 levels of generosity, and we're seeing how many of these are similar. So another one, he support them. There's an example in a time of drought, the Prophet ﷺ, he distributed food and water to the people, often prioritizing the needs of his companions over his own needs. So what is a lesson we can take here? Prioritizing the need of others in times of scarcity, it strengthens bonds, and it reminds us to be compassionate, even when our resources are limited. So even with limited resources, prioritize the need of others. It will strengthen our brothers, our bond, our ukhuwa, our brotherhood, sisterhood. It will strengthen that and remind us to be compassionate. Another example, when the Prophet ﷺ provided for the family of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. Now, after Ja'far was martyred in the Battle of Mu'tah, the Prophet ﷺ, he took responsibility for his family's welfare and he showed great care towards them. So he took responsibility for the family of Ja'far. The lesson we can take here, generosity should extend to those left behind. So when people pass away, whether it be their breadwinner, whoever, when members of their family pass away, generosity must extend to those who are alive, especially in supporting the families of those who have sacrificed for the community. For those who have made effort and sacrifice for the community, you should be generous to their family. What it does, it fosters a sense of family and community responsibility. So these are just a few of the selected examples of the Prophet's generosity. There are numerous examples, but I'd like to now quickly look at some examples of his justice. The standard I would use is the hadith. And this is one of the examples that I'll bring up, inshallah ta'ala, where he said, "Oh people, what destroyed the people who came before you was that if a person of high ranking among them stole, they would leave him and not punish him. And if someone who was deemed weak among them stole, they would apply the divinely decreed punishment upon him. By the one who has my soul in his hand, were Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, to steal, I would cut her hand off." This was demonstrating his standard of justice. So now let's look at some examples, ibnillah. The case of the stolen shield. This was one example. When a shield was stolen and a Muslim was wrongly accused, Prophet ﷺ investigated thoroughly, as he refused to convict the innocent despite social pressures, and he upheld justice. So they were pressuring him. A lot of persons were accused. The Prophet ﷺ investigated to ensure that he did not bring down the hudud. He did not bring down the judgment upon somebody who was innocent. So what is the lesson? Justice requires impartiality. It cannot be biased, and the courage to stand against what is the popular opinion. So justice means that even if you ensure you're impartial, not because the popular opinion that everybody in the room is saying that that person is not a good person. No, that person is long time them stay so. I know about this, I believe the other one. No, justice is critical. Upholding fairness, it promotes trust in leadership. Another example, justice between Muslim and non-Muslim. The famous example, one of the famous example where the Muslim accused the Jew. So the Muslim believed that, you know what, I'm a Muslim, let me go to the Prophet ﷺ and deal with him, con this person. But the Muslim was in the wrong, of course. So, what the Prophet ﷺ, he ensured he served justice without favoritism. And we realize that he gave the Jew his justice and told the Muslim that you're the one that is being unjust, you're the one that is wrong. So regardless, so this just shows he was very just regardless of religion. The lesson that we take here, justice, it transcends religious or social affiliation. So it transcends that. Fair treatment for all builds a community based on integrity and respect for all members. The third, and this was where the hadith came from. The Quraysh woman, she was of nobility and she stole. So they wanted, she stole and they wanted leniency for her because of her noble lineage. And the Prophet ﷺ then mentioned that, I mentioned in the hadith. So the lesson we take here, justice requires consistency, regardless of social status. Upholding equality strengthens the community and it discourages favoritism. Number 4, the rights of women in inheritance. So through revelation, the Prophet ﷺ ensured that women receive their rightful share of inheritance, establishing a balance of rights and responsibility for both genders. Because again, before Islam, this was not the case. People would take advantage of them and nothing would be left for them. So the lesson here, justice includes ensuring rights are granted to everybody in society, including vulnerable groups. And I should change the word into especially vulnerable groups, because they are many of the times the public opinion is so heavy that eyes become clouded, that the view of what is factual and what is not, it becomes clouded because so many people are saying it. It's like you're almost convinced that this has to be the truth if so much people is on this particular side. So we have to be very careful, especially with vulnerable groups. So promoting equality helps to create a balanced and a harmonious community. And the fifth one, bi'idhnillah, returning the spoils of war. This example, after battle, a man took some items from the spoils without proper distribution. So he took some. The Prophet ﷺ insisted that he return it. The Prophet ﷺ insisted that this has to be returned because he was establishing accountability. The lesson here, regardless if it's a friend, regardless if you like them, whatever it is, justice requires accountability and integrity. So when we ensure fairness in our communal resources, it upholds moral standards and also a level of trust within the community. And very quickly, inshallah ta'ala, there are 2 examples I didn't want to miss. There was an example of Nu'man bin Bashir radiallahu anh, where Nu'man radiallahu anh, he narrated a hadith where he said that his father gave him a special gift. And the Prophet ﷺ inquired, did he give that gift to his other sons? Do he have other sons? Did he give the gift to the other sons? And the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded him and said, so I am not going to, because he wanted the Prophet ﷺ to what should I say, to endorse his gift. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm not going to endorse injustice. So this just shows that it is very important that even with our children, we cannot show favoritism. So even with our children, we cannot show favoritism. The Islam prohibits that. We cannot show preferential treatment to them and exclude the rest. So we can't give one a lot and then the other nothing. We have to give equal. So what happened in this hadith? The father, he took it back from his son because he didn't have enough. He didn't have enough to give all of his sons. So to just give this son that he loved the most the gift, Prophet ﷺ said, no, this cannot be done. That is unjust. And then the man, he took the advice of Prophet ﷺ and he took back the gift because he didn't have enough to give all the sons. So he took it back. The last narration is by Aisha radiallahu anha, very quickly, where she mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he would distribute his time, his money, everything he would distribute fairly among his wives. And even the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was doing this, there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, oh Allah, I just mentioned the translation, this is how I distribute the things over which I have control. So do not blame me regarding that which you have control and I have no control. What was he saying? That for the material things, he can distribute it equally. But what he doesn't have control, meaning how his heart feels, who he might like more, then that part, he shouldn't be blamed for that. But at the same time, what he's showing that with regards to distribution, he's still going to be fair and just. So the heart, yes, the heart might like one more or more inclined to one. But this cannot be demonstrated within the physical gifts. So it cannot be demonstrated to say, here, because I like this one more, I give this one more, or give this one more time. That is not acceptable. That is actually blameworthy. So bi'idhnillah, justice is something that is profound. And just to summarize the points very quickly, generosity, what are some of the lessons we can take? It can transform hostility into friendship. we should forgive and overlook mistakes because it is essential creating a forgiving society. And true generosity, it involves personal sacrifice and prioritizing others. Generosity also includes providing for families and the community, showing lasting care and responsibility. As it relates to justice, justice requires impartiality. Fair treatment should be across all groups, and you should be equal in applying laws and will not apply favoritism. And justice includes protecting everyone's right and ensuring that resources are distributed with integrity. So in summary, inshallah ta'ala, these examples of the Prophet's life, what it illustrates is how essential generosity and justice are for building a morally strong, a united, and a compassionate community. So quickly with regards to the weak buster, number one, the narration on the reason Banu Qaynuqa was expelled. So these ones, inshallah ta'ala, I know last week was a bit heavy. So I tried not to be too heavy with the ones this week, inshallah ta'ala. There is a narration which mentions that says that this was the Jews, right? So this was the party of the Jews. There are some narrations that mention that the Jews were expelled because of something specifically that they did. And this is mentioned. It says that they tore the clothes of a Muslim woman. That somebody, you know, some of us may have heard it, that they took off the hijab of a Muslim woman. They took off her hijab. One of the Jews, he took off her hijab, and a Muslim man was killed. And then, of course, the Jew was killed. Then, of course, Sheikh Al-Albani, he says that this chain, the entire chain is missing. So this story is weak. So that reason that was mentioned, that was because, you know, there was a Jew that he pulled off the hijab of a Muslimah and a fight pursued and to a murder happened, that this was why they were expelled, then that is a weak narration. The other one with regards to there's another hadith which says that there was a Jewish poet. He knew that the Aus and the Khazraj, that those two tribes amongst the Ansar, he knew that they had rivalry before Islam, and he was stirring up rivalry to make them fight. This again is a weak narration. So this thing that he was doing poetry so that they could return to fighting, that this is a weak narration. And the third narration that is weak, that in the Battle of Uhud, when the Prophet ﷺ lost two of his teeth, it is said that he made a dua specific against Utbah bin Abi Waqqas, and this, of course, is a weak narration. Yes, he made a dua against the leaders in general that were fighting him. So yes, there are authentic narrations that he made dua in general with regards to those who were fighting him. But that hadith that mentions that he made a dua specifically against Utbah bin Abi Waqqas, and he specifically called him out, then that is a weak narration. So those are the three weak narrations, inshallah ta'ala. And quickly, with regards to something that is authentic, the persecution of the early Muslims. We already mentioned a narration by Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anh, that the first seven to accept Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr, Ammar, his mother Sumayya, Suhaib, Bilal, and Miqdad. Now, with regards to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah protected him through his uncle. We mentioned these details. The latter part I want to mention, inshallah ta'ala, that yes, Muslims were persecuted, and one of them was the family of Yasir, his son Ammar, and his wife Sumayya, radiallahu anhum ajma'in. The Prophet ﷺ, he passed by Ammar and his family while they were being persecuted, and he said, O family of Ammar and family of Yasir, receive the glad tidings, for your promised place is paradise. So this is one of the authentic narrations that yes, that entire family was persecuted. The mother and the father were killed. The son made a statement so that he was not killed. And the Prophet ﷺ said that yes, if this is done under force, it wasn't coming from your heart, it was from your tongue. And of course, you repented for it. So you don't have to worry. You did not apostate from Islam. When you're under that level of duress, then it is okay to make such a statement to ease off that duress. And that, inshallah ta'ala, is the end of the slides. So inshallah ta'ala, the floor is now open. If there are any questions or comments before we wrap up? If not, then we will end the session bi'idhnillah. So if there are no questions or comments, we will end the session. Okay, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, jazakum khairan kathiran. May Allah reward you all immensely. Shukran jazilan. Thank